So, as I was doing the research for the King Kong episode, I stumbled across this article which I won't link here for, reasons, not the least of which it's like 10 years old, but it was like this pearl-clutching thing in light of the then newly released King Kong movie, and it was about Adrian Brody's character and how we used to have manly men but now we have this, and he's like this effete, sensitive, intellectual writer, and he's not manly at all. Where did all the real men go? And well, that's, shitty. It did make me start thinking about how these movies present masculinity, and not the Kong version of masculinity, but that of his rivals, because it varies a lot. So, 1933, 1976, and 2005, we have three very different characters who exist in contrast to King Kong as Ann Darrow's real love interest. Kong changes really not all that much between these three versions, and Ann doesn't change a whole lot either. The Anns get more depth as incarnations progress, become more sympathetic to Kong, and occasionally really turned on by Kong. But, she's always an aspiring actress, always a bit of a demure pleaser, always. But the Jacks change a lot. His personality changes, his job changes, the reason he's even on the boat in the first place is completely different between each movie. And that's interesting because A, this story does not have a lot of variation between incarnations, and B, King Kong, the story, is effectively a love triangle, meaning that our human love interest, our Jacks, he's the PETA. Yeah. 30-ish years between huge remakes, and this is if we ignore the non-exclusively American productions, which are interesting in their own right, but for the sake of this video, I'm focusing only on the variations of the original Jack Driscoll, as we take a look at the civilized masculine that contrasts our beast. This is the Jacks of King Kong.
Beauty and the Beast.
So in the 1933 version, our chief players are our aspiring actress/damsel, the uncivilized beast what kidnaps her, the Hollywood hotshot, and Jack Driscoll. He is the first mate, and he hates women. No, really, they actually say that.
Why, Jack, you hate women.
He doesn't like them on the ship, see? He thinks they're a nuisance, all getting in the way with their lady bits.
Oh, you're all right, but women just can't help being a bother.
But this was all just a front, really. Like all toddlers, Jack was really just protesting too much because he actually kind of liked her.
I'm scared for you. I'm scared of you, too. Say, I guess I love you.
That is such a tremendous fucking jump to... Actually, no. I take that back. That might be the realest statement anyone has ever made about love in a movie. I take it back. While Carl Denham drives the plot and Jack is Ann's love interest, neither have anything really to do with each other. So Jack, having nothing to do with the actual plot, his sole function in this movie is to act in contrast to Kong as the Ann's love interest, the obviously desirable male alternative.
Oh, this is no place for a girl.
And while this trope of a character never really went away, we still see this guy today in some forms. He is a huge contrast to Brody's Jack, so much so that he needed to be parodized in the remake.
I guess you don't think much of women on ships, do you?
No, they're a nuisance.
That was the only way to contextualize the way he treated Anne. To look back at the 30s and go, oh you, oh backwards you. Thank God the 70s came along. Speaking of which...
Jack Prescott. I'm from Princeton, Department of Primate Paleontology.
Department of, are you lying hippie?
Jeff Bridges plays Jack Prescott, winner of the Worst Beard Ever award, and he's an environmentalist. And that, is not easy to do well. I'm not sure it has ever actually been done well in a movie. He has a much more concrete reason to even be here. He stows away because he's a primate paleontologist. So in that way, he has an actual connection to Kong and the plot. That never really goes anywhere, except in the form of him talking down to every fucking person.
He's probably telling us we've contaminated their magic.
Wow, buddy, you're just an expert in everything, huh? He doesn't speak the language of the tribe, for instance, but he could just intuit what they say with astonishing accuracy. Because he gets it, man.
He wants to make a deal. 6 of them for Dwan.
He's not like the man. He gets it.
When we took Kong, we kidnapped their god. A year from now, that'll be an island full of burnout drunks.
Wow. Fuck you. See, the movie frames him like he's this Cassandra. He's the one that's always right, because he gets it, man. But nobody ever listens to him, even though he is often a font of the worst ideas imaginable in the rare instance that somebody does listen to him.
Let him climb to the top of the World Trade Center.
What? See, because 70s, this movie has a confused relationship to the brand of feminism that was big in pop culture at the time, and therefore Dwan has a confused relationship to this chuckle fuck. But I think he's meant less to be appealing to Dwan, or any woman in the audience presumably, and more to be a reflection on how some righteous dudes saw themselves.
You took an advance.
Oh, I just donated that in your name to the SPCA fund for sending Kong home.
Because they get it, man. They get it.
Even an environmental rapist like you, even you.
Oh man, you were the very worst. It's no wonder the 80s were the way they were if you were the act we had to follow. Moving on.
How'd you think this would end, Carl?
In a pre-Lord of the Rings version of this movie, Jack was going to be one of the fighter pilots that shot Kong down. How's that for symbolism? Instead, Jack Driscoll is a writer instead of a sailor or an environmentalist. And I don't think you can really pin that on the fact that it was 2005 and men have to be sensitive now. Jack Driscoll could have been a variety of characters depending on the filmmaker. Like, imagine if it had been Michael Bay that remade King Kong and Jack could have been like this insecure, objectifying, possessive, entitled little asshat man-child. Or McGee could have made this movie and he could have been played by any one of these guys that nobody can tell apart. It could have been anything. And so Peter Jackson being the guy that made it, sensitive writer is what we got. The character of Jack has really been split in two. Adrian Brody plays Jack Driscoll, and then there's an actor in the movie within the movie that plays a Jack-like character who's basically a pastiche of OG Jack Driscoll.
Now they're a nuisance.
Jack is the movie within a movie's screenwriter. Unlike the previous two films, Anne knows Jack's work and knows who he is before she meets him, and she also admires him greatly beforehand.
Some guy, Driscoll.
Driscoll.
But that's kind of it. She admires his work, but she doesn't really have that much in common with him as a person. None of the Annes really have anything in common with any of the Jacks. So there's this sort of dichotomy between what I can offer you versus what Kong can offer you. In effect, Kong is indeed the id. He is emotion, and sometimes in a sexual way, and Jack is intellectual stimulation. Some of the time. That deep connection that 05 Anne develops with Kong is because they're just both so damn lonely, with which Jack, he isn't, not really. Jack already has a love in his life, and that's his work.
I'm in love with you.
He does take inspiration from Anne for his work, and she admires his work, but it doesn't really go deeper than that.
I'm writing it for you.
Why would you do that?
So when Jack rescues her from Kong, she's almost disappointed. I mean, sure, civilization's nice and all, but the real emotional connection she develops in the film is with Kong, not with Jack. This is a complete 180 from the original, where it's totally one-sided. But on the other hand, in that one, she's with Jack because, hey, why not? But in the end, do they even end up together? You know, we don't really know. The Jacks are always playing a sort of contrast to whatever Anne is feeling about Kong, be that emotion fear, or arousal, or friendship. Given that the 76 version is by far the shakiest of the three, I'm not sure what Jeff Bridges being a smug, obnoxious hippie brings to the table as a contrast to Dwan's confused, sexy times feelings about Kong. Maybe it's because this pretentious beardo would cause any vag to calcify into dust, so of course Kong looks like a sexy alternative.
Lady, God preserve thee.
Fuck you! But I don't think any of these movies are trying to present some form of idealized masculinity, because none of the Jacks really get the girl. OG Jack kinda does maybe. He loves Anne because the movie said so. Jack Prescott isn't with Anne at the end because, I don't know, celebrity or something. And Brody Driscoll Jack, it ends with a platonic hug. He cares, sure, but they kind of seem to be over each other before the whole New York rampage even takes place. Like, they weren't even talking. So what I take from this is that we aren't changing this character for changing the character's sake, but where the Anne/Kong Beauty and the Beast dynamic is a lot more timeless, the more normalized I'm a man and you're a woman dynamic has shifted a lot in the last 80 years. And so who knows what we will be seeing in remakes of the Hunger Games 30 or 40 years from now. What will PETA look like then?